What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors sits down for what should be a simple interview, only to face a host who thinks he can say whatever he wants? In just 33 seconds of one particular exchange, Piers Morgan went from smug television personality to a man watching his own show crumble around him, all because he couldn't keep his entitled opinions to himself. Samuel L. Jackson walked onto that set like he always does, calm, collected, professional. He's done thousands of interviews. He knows how these things work. You show up, you answer some questions, you promote whatever project you're working on, and everybody goes home happy. Simple, right? But from the moment he sat down across from Piers Morgan, something felt off. The air in that studio was thick with tension, and it wasn't coming from Samuel. Piers Morgan started the interview normally enough, welcoming Samuel to the show, making small talk about his latest film. But then, just a few minutes in, Morgan decided to pivot. He wanted to talk about something else entirely, something that had nothing to do with why Samuel was even there. He wanted to talk about politics, about social issues, about things that had become hot-button topics in the media, and not in a respectful way, not in a genuine attempt to understand Samuel's perspective. No, Morgan came at it like he already had all the answers, like he was about to educate Samuel L. Jackson on how the world really works. Samuel stayed calm. He's been in this business long enough to know when someone's trying to bait him. He answered the first question diplomatically, thoughtfully even. He explained his viewpoint clearly, without getting heated, without raising his voice. But Morgan wasn't interested in a conversation. He was interested in a confrontation. "Well, that's a very interesting perspective," Morgan said, his voice dripping with condescension. "But don't you think you're being a bit naive about this? I mean, come on. You live in a bubble in Hollywood. You don't really understand what regular people are going through." The studio got quieter. The crew members behind the cameras shifted uncomfortably. You could feel the disrespect hanging in the air like smoke. Here was Piers Morgan, a television host, telling Samuel L. Jackson, a man who grew up during segregation, a man who marched for civil rights, a man who earned every single thing he has through decades of hard work, that he doesn't understand real life. Samuel leaned forward slightly. His voice stayed level, but there was steel in it now. "I grew up in Tennessee during segregation. I was at Martin Luther King's funeral. I've seen things and lived through things that you couldn't even imagine. So don't sit there and tell me I don't understand what regular people go through." Instead of backing down, instead of recognizing that he'd crossed a line, Morgan doubled down. That's what entitled people do. They can't admit when they're wrong. They just keep pushing, keep talking, keep trying to prove they're the smartest person in the room. "Well, yes, of course, I respect all of that," Morgan said, though his tone suggested he respected none of it. "But you have to admit that your wealth and status now puts you out of touch with ordinary working-class people. You can't possibly relate to their struggles anymore." Samuel took a breath. You could see him deciding whether to let it go or to address what was really happening here. He chose truth. "You're sitting here in your expensive suit, in your fancy television studio, and you're going to lecture me about being out of touch? You, who were born into privilege, who never had to fight for anything in your life? That's rich." The camera operators were probably scrambling at this point, unsure whether to keep rolling or cut to commercial. But this was live television. There was no escape hatch. This was happening in real time, and everyone watching at home could feel the building explosion. Morgan's face flushed red. He wasn't used to being challenged like this, especially not on his own show, in his own studio, in his own chair. He was supposed to be the one in control, the one asking the tough questions, the one making his guests squirm. But now the tables had turned, and he didn't like it one bit. "Now hold on just a minute," Morgan said, his voice rising. "I've worked very hard to get where I am. I've earned my position through years of journalism and hard work. Don't you dare suggest that I haven't struggled or that I don't understand the real world." Samuel actually laughed at that. Not a mean laugh, but a laugh of pure disbelief. "You think writing columns and hosting television shows is the same as what most people go through? You think that struggle? Man, you really are as out of touch as I thought." That's when Morgan made his fatal mistake. That's when his ego took over completely, and he said the thing that would end this interview and damage his reputation in ways he couldn't even comprehend yet. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and with the most condescending smirk you've ever seen, he said this: "Well, at least I don't make a living pretending to be other people and playing dress-up for a camera. At least my work has real substance and meaning." The entire studio went silent, dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on that set. Because what Piers Morgan just did was insult not just Samuel L. Jackson, but every single actor, every artist, every creative person who's ever worked in film or television or theater. He dismissed an entire art form, an entire profession, as worthless. And he did it with a smile on his face, like he'd just delivered the cleverest line ever spoken. Samuel L. Jackson stood up. He didn't storm off in anger. He didn't yell or curse or make a scene. He simply stood up, slowly, deliberately, and looked down at Piers Morgan with the kind of withering stare that could melt steel. "You know what? I'm done here," Samuel said, his voice quiet but absolutely final. "I came here to talk about my film, to have a professional conversation, but you clearly have no interest in that. You just want to stroke your own ego and tear other people down to make yourself feel important. I don't need this. I don't need you. And I definitely don't need to sit here and be disrespected by someone who's never created anything of value in his entire life." Morgan sputtered, trying to regain control of the situation. "Now wait, Samuel, don't be so sensitive. I was just having a bit of fun. Can't you take a joke?" "A joke?" Samuel said, and now there was real anger in his voice. "You think insulting someone's life's work is a joke? You think belittling what I do, what thousands of talented people do, is funny? That's not humor, that's just cruelty. And I'm not going to sit here and take it." Morgan tried one more time, his voice taking on a pleading quality now, because he could see this was going very, very wrong. "Samuel, please, sit back down. Let's continue the interview. I apologize if I offended you." But it was too late for apologies. Samuel was already unhooking his microphone, already heading toward the exit. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about me being offended. This is about you thinking you can say whatever you want to whoever you want without consequences. Well, here's a consequence. I'm leaving. Good luck with the rest of your show." Morgan's producers were probably panicking in the control room. This was a disaster. One of the biggest movie stars in the world was walking off their set, live on television, because their host couldn't control his own ego. They cut to commercial immediately, but the damage was done. Everyone watching had seen exactly what happened. But here's where it gets even more interesting, because Samuel wasn't even out of the studio yet when Morgan decided to make things worse. As Samuel was walking away, microphone off, clearly done with the whole situation, Morgan called after him, loud enough for the cameras to pick up, loud enough for the audience to hear. He said, "This is exactly what I'm talking about. These Hollywood types can't handle any real criticism. They live in their bubble, and the moment someone challenges them, they run away." Samuel stopped walking. He turned around slowly, and the look on his face was something that no one in that studio would ever forget. It wasn't anger anymore. It was disappointment. It was the look of someone who just confirmed their worst suspicions about another person. "You still don't get it?" Samuel said, projecting his voice across the studio without even needing a microphone. "I'm not running away from criticism. I welcome real criticism, thoughtful criticism. Criticism that comes from a place of genuine curiosity or disagreement. What I'm walking away from is disrespect. What I'm walking away from is your need to tear people down to build yourself up. What I'm walking away from is you." And then he was gone, just like that, out of the studio, into the hallway, leaving behind a host who was scrambling to figure out how to fill the rest of his show and explain to his viewers why one of the biggest stars in Hollywood had just walked off his set. Morgan tried to play it cool when they came back from commercial. He tried to spin it as Samuel being too sensitive, too quick to take offense, unable to handle tough questions. But everyone watching knew the truth. They'd seen it with their own eyes. They'd watched Piers Morgan insult his guest, belittle his profession, and then act shocked when there were consequences for his actions. The thing about moments like this is that they reveal character. They show you who people really are when the pressure is on, when things don't go according to plan, when they're forced to react in real time without a script or a safety net. And what this moment revealed was devastating for Piers Morgan. It showed a man so consumed by his own self-importance that he couldn't even conduct a basic interview without turning it into an opportunity to demonstrate his supposed intellectual superiority. It showed a man who thought his position as a host gave him the right to say whatever he wanted without pushback. It showed a man who, when challenged, couldn't defend his positions with logic or reason. So he resorted to personal attacks and cheap shots. But more than anything, it showed the contrast between him and Samuel L. Jackson. Because while Morgan was busy trying to score points and win arguments, Samuel was simply trying to maintain his dignity and self-respect. He didn't come on that show looking for a fight. He came to do his job, to promote his work, to have a conversation. It was Morgan who turned it into something ugly. Let's talk about what led up to that final, explosive moment though. Because it didn't come out of nowhere. The tension had been building throughout the entire interview, like a pressure cooker slowly heating up until it finally explodes. Every question Morgan asked seemed designed not to illuminate or inform, but to trap. Every response Samuel gave was met not with curiosity or follow-up questions, but with dismissal or contradiction. About 10 minutes into the interview, Morgan brought up a charity that Samuel supports, one that helps underprivileged kids get access to arts education. It should have been an easy, positive topic, but Morgan couldn't help himself. "Don't you think," he asked, "that teaching kids about acting and filmmaking is a bit frivolous when they should be learning practical skills that will actually help them get jobs?" Samuel's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure. Arts education isn't frivolous. It teaches creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, discipline. These are skills that transfer to any career. Plus, why are you assuming these kids can't pursue the arts professionally? Some of the greatest actors, directors, and artists came from nothing. They just needed someone to give them a chance. Morgan waved his hand dismissively. Yes, but realistically, how many of them are actually going to make it in Hollywood? Wouldn't it be more responsible to steer them toward more stable careers? More responsible, Samuel repeated, and you could hear the incredulity in his voice. Who are you to decide what's responsible for these kids? Who are you to put limits on what they can dream about or achieve? That's exactly the kind of thinking that keeps people trapped in boxes, that tells them they're not good enough or smart enough or worthy enough to pursue what they love. Morgan shifted in his seat, clearly not liking being called out. "I'm simply being realistic. Not everyone can be a movie star. And not everyone wants to be," Samuel shot back. "But everyone deserves the chance to explore their talents, to discover what they're passionate about, to be exposed to art and culture and creativity. That's what makes us human. That's what gives life meaning. But I wouldn't expect you to understand that since your whole career seems to be built on tearing down anything that doesn't fit into your narrow view of what's valuable." The audience in the studio was completely silent now. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a real ideological clash between two very different worldviews. On one side, Piers Morgan, representing a cynical, hierarchical perspective where success is narrowly defined and most people should know their place and stay in it. On the other side, Samuel L. Jackson, representing possibility, creativity, and the belief that everyone has value and potential regardless of where they come from. Morgan tried to regain control by switching topics again. He brought up a recent film Samuel had been in, but not to discuss the story or Samuel's performance. Instead, he wanted to criticize the film's budget. These big Hollywood blockbusters cost hundreds of millions of dollars to make. Don't you think that money could be better spent on more important things? Samuel actually looked confused by the question. "Are you seriously asking me if I think art and entertainment have no value? Is that really where we are right now?" "I'm asking," Morgan said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone again. "If you ever stop to think about the excess and waste in your industry, while regular people are struggling to pay their bills?" "First of all," Samuel said, leaning forward, "those big-budget films employ thousands of people, crew members, craftspeople, caterers, drivers, assistants, all the people who work behind the scenes to make movies happen. Those are regular people with bills to pay, and the film industry provides good-paying jobs for them. Second, people need entertainment. They need escape. They need stories. Especially when times are hard, art and entertainment become even more important, not less. But you're so focused on finding ways to criticize and judge that you can't see any of that." Morgan scoffed. "Oh, please, don't act like you're some kind of working-class hero. You make millions of dollars per film." "And I earned every penny of it," Samuel said firmly. "I worked for decades, took roles nobody else wanted, honed my craft, paid my dues. I came from nothing and built a career through talent and hard work. But you want to make that sound like something shameful, like success is a character flaw. What's really going on here is that you're resentful. You're resentful that actors and artists get attention and respect, and you don't think they deserve it. You think you deserve it more." That hit a nerve. You could see it on Morgan's face, the flash of anger, the wounded pride. "I've done very well for myself. Thank you very much. I have nothing to be resentful about." "Then why do you spend all your time trying to make other people feel small?" Samuel asked. Why do you use your platform to belittle and dismiss instead of uplift and explore? What are you so afraid of? The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswerable, because the truth was obvious to everyone watching. Piers Morgan was afraid of irrelevance. He was afraid that in a world full of genuinely talented, creative, accomplished people, he would be exposed as someone whose only skill was talking loudly and acting superior. So he tried to drag everyone else down to his level, to make them seem as shallow and vapid as he feared he actually was. That's when Morgan decided to go after Samuel's acting career more directly. You know, you've made a lot of films over the years, but how many of them are actually any good? How many of them will be remembered in 50 years? Samuel smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. I don't make movies hoping they'll be remembered in 50 years. I make movies to tell stories, to entertain people, to explore characters. Some films work better than others. That's the nature of the business. But I show up, I do my job, I give it everything I have. Can you say the same? What have you created that will outlast you? What have you made that brings joy or meaning to anyone's life? Morgan's face went red again. I inform people. I ask the tough questions that others are afraid to ask. No, Samuel said quietly, you antagonize people. You provoke and prod and push until they react, and then you act like you've accomplished something. But asking tough questions means listening to the answers and engaging with them honestly. You don't do that. You just wait for your turn to talk again. The interview was spiraling completely out of control now, and Morgan knew it. But instead of trying to salvage things, instead of acknowledging that maybe he'd approached this whole conversation wrong, he got defensive. He got mean, and that's when he made the comment about Samuel playing dress-up, the comment that would finally push things past the point of no return. After Samuel stood up and delivered his devastating response about not needing to be disrespected, after he started walking away, Morgan made one last desperate attempt to maintain some shred of dignity. But it was too late. His true character had been revealed for everyone to see. The crew members wouldn't look at him. His producers were probably already getting angry calls from the network executives. And somewhere out there, millions of viewers were watching a master class in how not to conduct an interview, how not to treat a guest, how not to be a decent human being. What made this whole situation even worse for Morgan was that Samuel L. Jackson handled it perfectly. He didn't lose his temper. He didn't curse or yell or throw things. He simply stood up for himself with dignity and clarity. He drew a line and said, "This far and no further." And then he followed through. He didn't let Morgan manipulate him into staying. He didn't fall for the fake apologies or the attempts to make him seem like he was overreacting, because Samuel understood something that Morgan apparently didn't. Respect isn't something you're owed just because of your position or your platform. Respect is something you earn through your actions and your treatment of others. And in those 33 seconds when everything fell apart, when Morgan's carefully constructed persona crumbled away, he proved that he hadn't earned anyone's respect at all. The saddest part is that this could have been avoided so easily. If Morgan had just conducted a normal interview, if he'd asked genuine questions and listened to the answers, if he'd treated his guest with basic courtesy and professionalism, none of this would have happened. Samuel would have talked about his film, shared some interesting stories, maybe made the audience laugh a few times, and everyone would have gone home happy. But Morgan's ego wouldn't allow for that. He needed to be the star of his own show. He needed to prove how smart he was, how tough he was, how he wasn't afraid to challenge anyone. And in doing so, he revealed himself to be exactly what Samuel accused him of being, someone more interested in tearing others down than building anything up. As Samuel walked out of that studio, he left behind more than just an unfinished interview. He left behind a lesson about dignity, about self-respect, about knowing your worth and not allowing anyone to diminish it. He showed everyone watching that you don't have to accept mistreatment just because someone has a microphone and a camera. You don't have to smile and nod when someone insults you. You can simply stand up, speak your truth, and walk away. And Piers Morgan? He was left sitting in his chair, trying to figure out how to explain to his audience why one of the biggest stars in the world had just exposed him as a fraud on live television. He tried to spin it, tried to make it seem like Samuel was the problem, like he was too sensitive or too arrogant to handle real questions. But nobody was buying it. They'd all seen what really happened. The power dynamic that Morgan thought he controlled, the authority he thought his position gave him, all of it evaporated in those few minutes. Because true power doesn't come from a title or a television show. True power comes from integrity, from conviction, from the courage to stand up for yourself and others, even when it's uncomfortable or costly. Samuel L. Jackson walked off that set with his head held high and his reputation intact. He showed the world exactly who he is: a professional, a man of principle, someone who won't compromise his dignity for anyone's entertainment. Meanwhile, Piers Morgan was left with a half-empty studio, a ruined interview, and the knowledge that his own arrogance and entitlement had created a moment that would define his career in all the worst ways. That's what happens when you mistake a platform for wisdom, when you confuse controversy for insight, when you think being provocative is the same as being profound. Eventually, someone comes along who sees through it all, who isn't impressed by your bluster or intimidated by your status, who simply says no. And when that happens, when the emperor is revealed to have no clothes, all the cameras in the world can't save you. This moment became a perfect example of everything wrong with a certain type of media personality. The ones who think their job is to create conflict rather than foster understanding. The ones who value ratings over responsibility. The ones who hide their own insecurities behind a mask of aggressive certainty. Piers Morgan embodied all of that in this interview, and Samuel L. Jackson held up a mirror that forced everyone to see it clearly. The really remarkable thing is how calm Samuel stayed throughout almost the entire ordeal, even when he was being insulted, even when his life's work was being dismissed, even when he was being talked down to and patronized. He kept his cool. He responded with logic and clarity and truth. It was only when it became absolutely clear that Morgan had no interest in an actual conversation, only in scoring cheap points and boosting his own ego, that Samuel made the decision to leave. And that decision said everything. It said, I value myself too much to participate in this charade. It said my time and energy are too precious to waste on someone who has already demonstrated their bad faith. It said I would rather walk away from this opportunity than compromise my principles. Those are not easy choices to make, especially on live television with millions of people watching. But Samuel made them anyway, because that's what integrity looks like in action.